Hey everybody, welcome to the star ratings for Hunter, Mage, and Paladin. Apologies if my voice sounds a little bit different, sorry, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather again today, so I might have a slightly deeper, raspier voice. Anyway, that's not going to stop me from doing these ratings though. First up, we have Hunter. I'm just going to do a lot of Hunter's cards together because Hunter is quite a large variety of decks I think will spawn from this expansion, and some of them will just be adding to previously existing expansions of the class. So Beast Hunter is already a thing. It's not the best Hunter variant. I think that is still the Secret Arcane Hunter. Beast Hunter is probably sat somewhere in the low tier 2, high tier 3 range, and they're getting some tools I think are going to elevate them up a little bit. Now, I think you're going to be able to run these beasties in a number of ways. I think there's going to be an aggro beast deck, which uses stuff like Sneaky Snakes, the Saddle Up, the Bovine Skeleton, Messenger Buzzard, 10-Gallon Hat, Camouflage Mount, and Spurfang to get you like these sticky minions that have Death Rattles of giving you like another minion that's going to come from it. And it's going to be a tokeny deck, and it's just going to be really annoying to deal with. I then think there's going to be a big beast deck, which, you know, is kind of what the Beast Hunter is right now. There's going to use a lot of these cards as well. And then finally, I think there's going to be a Highlander Hunter deck. And I was a bit, underwhelmed by it because Feldra in the Lost is not a great effect to run a Highlander deck. However, Reno is now being shown to be a thing. And I think Reno makes it worth running this Highlander Beast Hunter. So that's going to affect the ratings. Anyway, first up, I'm going to give 3 stars to Sneaky Snake, Saddle Up, and Bovine Skeleton. I think they will all go in the token aggressive Beast Hunter deck. I don't think they'll go into this Highlander deck. I think the Sneaky Snakes is going to be... I just don't think you're going to have enough cards to buff up the Sneaky Snakes to justify running it as a one-off. I think you're going to run other cards that shoot for other cards instead, like drawing cards, like drawing your 1-cost spells. I think you'll never get a big enough board for Saddle Up to be worth it. Bovine Skeleton may make the deck, but I think there are better 3-drop options for the Highlander deck. The rest of these cards, all getting 4 stars. I think Highlander Beast Hunter is going to be a tier 2 deck. And I think Messenger Buzzard, 10-Gallon Hat, Camouflage Mount, Spurfang, Silver Serpent, and Feldra in the Lost will all go into that deck. Despite the fact I think Feldra in the Lost is very underwhelming, you will still run it in the Highlander deck. Also, I was a little underwhelmed by Silver Serpent. Again, I think this will make its way into this Highlander deck to get you into the later game where you can play your giant beasties as well. I should have mentioned as well, before I did all these star ratings, again, a lot of people are underwhelmed by the set, but the fact that Highlander is a mechanic of the set means that it kind of artificially elevates the scores of some of these cards, because you're going to be running more of them as one-offs in decks than you otherwise would be if you were running, like, non-Highlander decks. So yeah, I think these will all be 4-star cards. Then finally, the last card they got was Star Shooter, which was clearly meant for an Arcane Hunter deck. And I ummed over this. I honestly went from giving this 1 star to giving it 5 stars, because Arcane Hunter is currently in like the tier 2 realms, but in the not so distant past, it was tier 1. They slowed some of their big arcane buffing spells down, and I think people just got better playing around the secrets. In my head, I was like, maybe Star Shooter gets into the deck instead of Starstrung Bow, and you drop the secret package that people play around, and maybe you can run a more aggressive opening instead, or an opening more suited to playing these arcane spells. But after like playing around with it and looking at deck lists for this type of deck, I've come to the conclusion it's going to be 2 stars. I think it's going to be tested, but not good enough. At the end of the day, the deck is more aggro-orientated. You want your weapon swings to go off as quickly as possible and push the damage. You want the damage front-loaded, right? And the Starstrung Bow front-loads that damage. If you compare the 2 at 4 mana, assuming, 2 secrets have popped off for the Starstrung Bow, would you rather have a 5-2 weapon or a 2-3 weapon in an aggro deck? You'd prefer the 5-2 weapon. Irrespective of the fact that this will give you 3 arcane shots at the end of it that you could then buff it, I think it's all just going to be too slow for the aggro deck. People will be able to, heal back up or arm back up during this time, and therefore it won't be good enough for that deck. Next, over to Mageland. And Mageland, I don't think you're eating good if you're a mage player, other than the fact, your deck is arguably tier 1 right now. They have the Excavate package, which I've thrown Taithalan, the Blood Watcher, in there, just because I think he's kind of was designed with the intention of going into this, generate a bunch of cards deck, play them for the cheap. Cryopreservation, Blast Mage Miner, Reliquary Researcher, that's the payoff for your Excavation. Cryopreservation and Blast Mage Miner are so bad as cards, I'm giving these 3 cards 1 star. I don't think the Excavation Mage package will be a thing. Yeah, it's just that simple. Cryopreservation is just too bad. Blast Mage Miner is... Basically, you're going to want to run this as a control deck, and you're going to be competing with Rainbow Mage, and Rainbow Mage is just going to blow this out of the water, whatever you do. So, irrespective of the fact that Reliquary Research is actually a really good payoff for Excavating twice, is a really good value. The Excavate cards are just so bad that I don't think you'll ever justify running it in a deck. Taithalan, on the other hand, I'm going to give 2 stars to. I think it will see testing, but I don't see a world right now where Mage generates a cards that you would want to play Taithalan to get a 4-mana discount, but they can't become 0-cost spells. If they could become 0-cost, Taithalan would have a niche where he would see play, possibly with the Sith deck, but this less than 1 requirement just brutalize him so much. Like, the Arcane Bolts already cost 1, so you don't benefit from discounting them any further because you can't. The only thing I could think of is that maybe it would go into a Frozen Touch type of deck, that the Frozen Touches could get discounted back to 1, but you're not even getting a 4-mana discount. Would you play a 4-mana card for a 2-mana discount? I just don't see it right now. But it's one to watch, because it is cards, it's not spells, so maybe it makes a Mech Mage package or an Elemental Mage package, but when I was building my Elemental Mage deck, my Theory Craft deck, I don't think I got Taithalan in there, so I don't think I'll make the Mech Mage deck either. Then we have the big Spell Mage enabler, Sunset Volley. I've actually put together a big Spell Mage list. I don't think it's actually that far away from being something that is kind of interesting at the very least. But if you compare it to Big Spell Mage from like a year ago, who had the Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron, and they had the Drakefire Amulet, what is the big spells right now for Mage? It's Sunset Volley and the Arcane Defenders. It's just not a good comparison. Sunset Volley might have seen that big Spell Mage deck, but the Arcane Defenders was just not enough cheat, right, to run basically a deck with no spells in Mage that was running spells. So I'm going to give this 1 star right now. I don't think it's even going to be like tier 4 status. It needs a little bit more support. It needs something else as well that allows you to discount the spells other than DJ Mana Storm. Sadly, I don't think the DJ party is going to start with this set. Similarly, Stargazing. Draw a different arcane spell. If you play this turn, it casts twice. I'm giving this 2 stars. I think this will see some play, and I'm going to mention a deck in a moment that I think you might see some play in. But the Arcane Vexalis package, which I think is the deck that would most likely want to run the Stargazing, I just don't think you're going to need it. Vexalis will just fill that niche for you. The other situation where I think you might want to play Stargazing is with your big Spell Mage package with Arcane Defenders. For 10 mana, you get 4, 5, 6s, right, with Taunt and Can't Be Targeted. That's pretty obnoxious for 10, but I don't think it is worth the 2-card combo and waiting for 10 mana. And I don't think you could put Stargazing in your big Spell Mage deck, because you're going to be probably running the Naga that swaps the costs of spells from your hand with your opponents. So you can't have cheap spells in there, so Stargazing wouldn't get in there. The other place it might see play is actually in a Rainbow Mage-like deck, because they have got arcane spells that draw cards, namely Wisdom of Norganon and sometimes Volume Up. But I think Stargazing into like Volume Up, especially if you get the Finale effect, it's 6 mana, draw 8. It's a lot of draw, but it might be too much draw. Stargazing into Norganon might be a thing. You play a 2 mana card, you might get a 0 mana, draw 2 spell. You duplicate it with Stargazing, so it's 0 mana, draw 4. That, I think, is reasonable, but I don't think it'll quite make the cut, sadly. Then we have Azurite Vein, the new secret. 1 star, this card is actually awful. I was thinking about when I was rating this, and by the way, you're very lucky that you got 1 star. My rating system was 1 to 5, and you were lucky to get 1. I was thinking, if this was a Paladin secret and there was still a thing, and this was a 1 mana secret, would it see playing Paladin? And I don't think it would do. I think this is too expensive. It's too easy to play around. It's just awful. Awful secret. And I'm almost certain that they made this secret and toned it back down because the Mage secret discovery pool was just too good for like rogues and stuff. So it's like a side nerf to secret rogue. I don't understand. So anyway, I don't think it's good. You won't put it in your deck for certain. And occasionally you're going to discover it and be really sad. Then we get to some cards that I think might see some play, but it won't be in a tier 1 or a tier 2 deck. Elemental Mage, I think, is going to slot somewhere in the tier 3 region, so I've given both of these 3 stars. You'll tempo out your elementals and just keep trying to smoke your opponent's face, and then you'll try and finish them off with some spell damage. The big payoff will be if you can draw Age Wind on like 5, and you get the Age Wind Death Rattle copied onto the Overflow Surger, or the card that is drawn with Methadune the Fractured, so that you can duplicate the effect and get spell damage plus 4 or plus, 14 if it's Overflow Surge and you fill the board. I can see that, blooding a few noses, but I think it's going to be so inconsistent that it won't trouble the tier 1 or tier 2 decks, and it's going to sit somewhere in tier 3. A bit similar to, where Vexalis Arcane Mage sits right now. And then finally, Heatwave. I was really underwhelmed by this, the quick draw card. Deal 2 damage to an enemy minion and its neighbours. Quick draw, you do it to all enemies instead. It's a 1 mana discount on Consecration, and Consecration doesn't see that much play, right? So this is obviously going to be a pretty low-rated card. That's right, 5 stars. The first 5-star card I've rated is Heatwave. Now, hold up, partner, you got some explaining to do. Yeah, okay, I'll give you some explaining. I think there is going to be, because of the pull for Reno, a Highlander Rainbow Mage deck will spawn from this. And I think Mage is one of the classes that, even though it hasn't got another Highlander payoff, Reno is so good that you will twist your deck to potentially run a Highlander variant of it. The decks I think are going to be best at doing this, other than the ones that have another Highlander payoff, are any deck that Renethal would have been good in. And you do see Renethal Mage out there. It doesn't quite make tier 1, it hits like the tier 2 status. But that's kind of, the fact that you're willing to put 10 other cards in your deck for 5 health kind of suggests that you would be also willing to go to 30 cards, all singletons, and have a really, really good payoff card in there. And I put together a list, and I think that the 2 or maybe 3 biggest losses to the deck is, firstly, you'd only have 1 Cosmic Keyboard. Cosmic Keyboard, very good in the early game to generate minions that you could trade with your opponent's minions, whilst you're also casting your spells of many classes. Heatwave is cheap enough that you could deal with some of the aggressive decks that Cosmic Keyboard would otherwise deal with. Similarly, the Inquisitive Creation, I believe it's called, the mech, you would only run 1 of those, and that is an insane card. You'd probably want something else that can deal with especially the early game. As you get into the later game, there are other options you can put into your deck for the controlling the board state. And also, it gives you time to generate cards that can deal with it. So I think Heatwave will slot into the deck just to fill up this gap. And when I drew together my list, Heatwave made the cut, even though I think it's at the very least, maybe I was a bit harsh on it. 2 damage to an enemy minion and its neighbours. If you hit all 3 enemies, it's 6 damage for 2 mana, right? That's a decent deal. And the quick draw effect, if you draw that into the Sith turn, which I know is it's so unlikely, it's a 2 damage, deal damage to the face spell, and you could just board wipe with that, and also maybe wipe your opponent's face out. So I think this will see play in Highlander, Reno, Rainbow Mage, whatever you want to call it, and I think it's going to be a tier 1 deck as well. Do I think it's going to do well into the matchup versus the Rainbow Mage, just the pure Rainbow Mage? No, I think it will probably overall lose that deck because you are playing weaker singleton cards, but I think it's still going to beat some of its rivals, and I think it's going to give it a better matchup into potentially other decks that would have these big boards that you just couldn't deal with the Mage deck, right? Instead, you'll Reno, and maybe you even plink them down with your button. I think it's going to be a thing, so I've given it 5 stars. Finally, we go into the land of the Paladin. Paladin has, I'd say, 2 big archetypes. They have Palahand, as I've been calling it, which is the handlock equivalent for Paladin. This archetype is awful. There's not enough support. They're all getting 1 star. The legendary is woeful. Showdown might be one of the worst cards ever printed in Hearthstone. And I think Living Horizon and Lawful Longarm, the juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze to make your Palahan decks. And if you're not running these cards that fill your hand with other cards, I think the cards will be too slow. I basically think Lawful Longarm, you will probably run... Is he called, like, Snooty... No, he's not called Snooty. What's he called now? I forgot his name, but the Paladin card that is a 5 cost that gets... Like, it's a 3/5 and gets, like, Rush, Divine Shield, Lifesteal, and all that jazz if for every pure Paladin card you have in your hand. I think Lawful Longarm will compare to that guy. That guy is not seeing play anyway right now in pure Paladin. Lawful Longarm requires you to go to a bigger hand, therefore I don't think the requirement is as easy to make as that card, and therefore I think it won't see any play. Living Horizon has got a pretty good payoff, but again, I don't think it's worth filling up your hand to play it. But of all the cards here, I think this is the most likely one to see some play. Deputization Aura, I need to actually say that I kind of undervalued it very slightly when I did the thoughts of the card. I didn't really consider that if you have a big board of minions, if you attack with the left minion to like a taunt minion, it dies. It will then buff your next leftmost minion, so you can kind of treat it like the Flame Tongue Totem, but for Paladin. I still think it's not very good, though. I think it's 1 star. There's better auras to run in the game, and I don't think you'd run both auras. I think it's too slow a play. Where I think Paladin might get a little bit of joy, though, this set, is this Highlander value Paladin. I think it might be the last bastion of... I'm not running a control deck, I'm not running a combo deck, I'm running a value deck. This will be the last hurrah of the value deck, because I don't see many of the other ones working particularly well. Spirit of the Badlands gets you copies of cards in your deck. Paladin had some insanely big legendaries. Even stuff like the Countess if you run it as a pure Highlander deck, and I think you might actually run this as a pure Highlander deck. Or you might even go so greedy that you run 1 copy of Reno in the deck still, and just hope you draw it before the Countess. I think that might be too much greed, but if you can play the Countess multiple times, the Countess is already in pure Paladin, such a back-breaking card to play against, and Spirit of the Badlands will give you opportunities to play that multiple times. Similarly, if you get like the Colossi, it's again pretty awkward to deal with, so I can see this Highlander Paladin deck, maybe even as a pure and a non-pure variant being a thing. And I think a lot of these cards will see play in that deck, so I'm giving these 4 stars. I think it'll be in tier 2. I don't think it's going to, pull up the trees in tier 2. I think it's actually going to sit somewhere pretty low down in it, maybe even go into tier 3. I might be looking at it through Paladin tinted glasses, to be honest with you. I will say, though, Hi-Ho Silverwing will probably see play in pure Paladin as well. Lay Down the Law and Prismatic Beam will see play in Kangor's Dancing Paladin or the Earthen Paladin decks. So there is a little bit of, sway in that. Do I think Earthen Paladin deck is going to be tier 2? I don't think it will, actually. I think it's going to be in, like, tier 3 region. Do I think pure Paladin's going to be in tier 2? No. I actually think it's going to drop down to tier 3 now because it's got a lot of bad stuff coming. There's some tech cards now to disrupt your pure deck by putting in neutral snake oil. So if the deck was ever too strong, you would just tech that into your ETCs and make them very sad. So yeah, I think all these will be 4 stars though, and I'm looking forward to playing with them. Holy Cowboy, on the other hand, I'm only giving it 2 stars, but it's a bit of a watch this space card. I think that the card is really good, but if you run a Highlander Paladin deck, there's actually not a lot of good holy spells anymore for you to discount. So I don't think you would run the Holy Cowboy in that deck. It just wouldn't quite make the cut. Then if you go to Pure Paladin now has been favouring an aggressive opening, and Holy Cowboy is not aggressive enough for that opening. So I think because of these reasons, it won't quite see play. However, in the future, if there becomes a really good Holy package for Paladin, Holy Cowboy will definitely see play in that deck, and depending on the quality of those cards, you might end up elevating this into the 5-star tier in the future, but for now, I think it's just 2 stars. Anyway, that's going to do it for this star ratings. Up next, god damn it, I should have checked it again. Priest is definitely up next time. Priest priest. It's priest, baby. It's the next 3 classes alphabetically. I can't remember them all off the top of my head. It's like priest, rogue, something else. Priest, rogue, something else, okay? We'll be doing those next time, so look forward to that. And I'll see you soon. Goodbye.